Welcome to the Alfalfa podcast, everybody. We are four radically moderate entrepreneur and investor friends seeking the alfalfa in money and life. We are Eric Johansson, Steven Cesaro. Nick Rabbani is having an amazing time in New York this week. We miss you, Nick. And I am Arman Asadi.
Wow, you're bringing the intro back.
Oh, yeah. I'm bringing some things back. Hello to the chat. What's up, everybody on YouTube live? If you're here listening live, watching live.
Thank God. Basil's back.
Got some amazing people in the house.
You guys can't pick on me anymore.
Listening to the podcast after the fact, thank you for tuning in again this week. We really appreciate it. This week, what is going on over there?
Oh, I always forget to.
So this week we are making some shifts. The experiment continues. I'll tell you about that in a second. We're going to begin with our latest insights and moves in money and business in the Alfalfa round. Then we're going to be doing a deep dive on room temperature superconductors, which we're very excited to dig into.
They sound lamer when you throw the room temperature in front of it, don't they?
Ambient, whatever. Is there a way to spice it up more? I don't know.
Just call them superconductors. Sounds sexy.
Yeah.
Lukewarm superconductors.
And then we'll be closing perhaps with a bit of a life alfalfa discussion. You can support the pod by becoming an Alfalfa member with a monthly donation. Head to alfalfapod.com. I added the link there, or the link is in the show notes below. And you can get your comment on the live stream by going through this link and donating to the pod. Shout out to all the community who have been supporting the podcast. Thank you. We actually had one this week that I'll read out from Elevate Bliss for $169.
New high score.
New high score. Top of the leaderboard, Elevate Bliss. His comment is, keep up the great work, boys. Don't make the pod too too organized, too structured. Flow with, why is it like this in my notes? I copy pasted it incorrectly.
Don't make the pod too scripted. Check.
Yeah, pretty much. What I love about Alfalfa is that it's like a fireside chat with my best friends every single week. Looking forward to catching you all in person again ASAP. We actually met Elevate at
ETH
Denver, and sounds like he'll be at Permissionless, which is very exciting.
Hell yeah.
So another easy way you guys can support the podcast is just send a friend a recent favorite episode. I think that's a great way to spread the word. If you haven't done that before, please do so. And make sure you're subscribed at alfalfapod.com. So Steven is hosting us this week with alcohol, with beverages. What are we drinking, Steven?
That's right. I went a little out there this week. I picked up a Zibibo.
Sorry?
You ever had that?
I'm sorry?
What now?
Yeah, see? Zibibo.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like it's a weird grape.
I've never heard of that.
It's like it's apparently like from the Muscat family, which is normally like a really sweet grape. And it's kind of a weird grape because it makes like very sweet wine, but it also makes wine like this. That's like a little bit.
Can I do like a spelling bee? Country of origin, please?
It's from Italy, southern Italy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how many grapes there are. Like when you think of like 11, 12 at the top of your head, and there's like thousands. It's kind of crazy. But then I also brought you a red for the dessert from a Barolo, because I know that you are a Barolo man, a man of the finest.
Doesn't miss
my Barolos. Been on a
Finest
Barolo
taste.
tip for a while now.
What do you think of this one?
Well, I just had my first or second sip.
Does it meet your standards?
Yeah, it definitely does. Great
Okay,
work,
good.
Steven.
Thank you.
Thank you for this. And speaking of, we just had our Z-Biotics before we started drinking. So thank you to our sponsor, Z-Biotics. I think this is one of the best bits of alfalfa we've had on the show. We actually reached out to them to sponsor the podcast because we liked it so much. So Z-Biotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic. It helps you not feel like shit the next day, and it seriously works. And that's what we've been telling everybody. So head to zbiotics.com/alfalfa. You'll get 15% off by using the code alfalfa. Jordan, if you want to drop the link as well for people. And when you feel like shit in the morning, it's not because of dehydration, which is what we've commonly come to learn. It's actually a toxic byproduct called, are you ready for this?
Acetaldehyde.
Thank you. I even have it phonetically spelled out here for
Nick
me.
did it better.
And Z-Biotics breaks this toxin down, and it was invented by PhD microbiologists, and they've done a great job. So we don't drink without it anymore, especially on days where we're going to have at least a couple drinks. And it allows you to get up the next day, be productive, not feel like shit, work out, and it's worked for us. So try it out. They also, I was looking at their site today. They actually do have a guarantee. So if you don't like it, you can send it back and get your money back. So head to zbiotics.com/alfalfa for that. Yes.
Is it a forward slash or a backslash?
I've never heard of a backslash. Isn't it always a forward
I don't
slash?
know. You said it, and I was just thinking.
So Steven, we've been talking about the pod lately, you know, all four of us, but we've decided to kind of, you know, I put out this survey to the community recently, and we're always iterating, right? We're always trying to learn how we can do better, how we can make this podcast more fun, more valuable for our listeners, for our community, because it's not just a podcast, it's a community as well. And everyone knows that this is just one great big experiment, and we just continuously are doing our best to make it more entertaining and valuable for everybody. So why don't you explain just kind of where we landed with this next step of the iteration?
Yeah. I mean, we figured out that it seems like people really like the actual alfalfa a little bit.
Wouldn't say.
A little bit. Yeah, I know. I know we put it right there in the title, but that's what the people want. So we're going to try to do a little more of that. Be a little less U.S. centric in some of our stuff. Because I know we've got a big international audience there.
We do.
So be a little more mindful of that.
Yeah, like
Thank
30,
you guys.
40%.
Yeah, it's almost half the freaking audience at this point.
Incredible feedback, though. Like,
Oh, yeah.
It's like
Thank you for mentioning that.
that's like amazing.
Some of like our like the comments from people in general, because I made the survey anonymous, like hoping people would just be brutally honest. And their brutal honesty was just very positive overall. And we really appreciate you guys, those of you that filled it out. And if you haven't, you still can. It's in the Discord. I linked to it. But
Yeah, and I think we're going to try to do a better job, too, of getting a little out of like the kind of crypto rut. We're not going to stop doing crypto. I know a lot of you guys
well,
like
really, the big
crypto.
learning was make sure we're doing money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys
Don't
love the
lose the
money.
money.
But we want to bring like the kind of experiences of everybody to the pod a little bit more, because you and Nick are
Business
doing
side
really
of
cool
things.
stuff,
Yeah.
and we don't want the whole show to be about charting meme coins.
Yeah, I think the big thing was like probably cut or reduce the politics, especially the U.S. centric stuff, and maybe even some of the life stuff, but have that be maybe more in the background, in the foreground, just being the intersection and us exploring things that we find interesting around money and business, our businesses, our backgrounds, the things we're working in, and of course life when it's appropriate. But today, you know, for example, talking about superconductors, I mean, there's so many applications for this that, you know, from a financial perspective, trading perspective, philosophy perspective, technology perspective, it affects everything. So it's a really big topic. But yeah, I mean, before we get to that, let's talk about our weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear about what's
Let's
going
go
on.
first. Me?
Yeah.
All right,
Sure.
fine. Oh, God, that just reminded me of
That's
the...
your
it reminded me of
that's
the...
your video.
Oh, the video where I'm arguing with myself.
Oh,
Boom.
I need to watch that again. We should watch that. We should play that
You
on the
say
pod.
boom to
I know
yourself.
that.
We've
needs
never
to be-
played that, have we?
That needs to be like linked in the... permanent-
Jordan, can we set that
like,
up for next week where we play that video to start the show? Yeah.
That was so good. So, yeah, this week was a crazy week in trading land. We had a lot of stuff going on. Got a bunch of stuff here to kind of throw out you guys if it sounds interesting. We had the launch of Coinbase's Layer 2 base, which featured a massive rug and allegations that Sam Bankman-Fried was the rugger.
Bald.
That was pretty crazy. DOJ announced potential actions against Binance today. And then we also saw ETH futures, a big push for applications for ETH futures ETFs today. Some kind of interesting stuff going on in the market there. I think I'm going to focus in on the Coinbase one first, because I think there's like an interesting byline here. Were you following what happened?
With what?
With so Coinbase's Layer 2 base launch, somebody made a meme coin
The
called
meme coin,
Bald,
and then they rugged it, right?
and then they rugged it after it
Yeah.
went. But some people
2 days
made
later.
like 500 or
Some guy
1,000 or
put, like,
50,000.
500.
Yeah, some guy turned $500 into $500,000.
Yeah.
You followed the whole thing on Twitter in
Yeah.
a span of like 24 hours. And then the dev basically just pulled the liquidity and the coin went to zero. And then the crypto Twitter detective started putting out all
Yeah.
these analysis on like why the guy who rugged the project might actually be
There was some like non-spurious correlation to FTX
Do you guys think
wallet
it's
addresses,
an
or
FTX related?
It was a combination of like doing a analysis on the wallet address and their interactions with stuff, but then people
The
were
way
also
typing.
the grammar and the words
Grammar.
that the Twitter account said.
That was pointing to Sam.
It was
right?
pointing to Sam.
Well, what probability do you guys assign to it being Sam or someone related to Sam?
It could also be Sam Trabucco, who was the other FTX guy. This is the guy who sailed off on a yacht and like left the company a month before all the
Be an
shit hit the
Alameda
fan.
guy, right?
Yeah, he was an
Trabucco and
guy.
Caroline, or
Yeah,
just,
Trabucco.
are just living
You
it
guys
up.
think it's one of them?
Well,
It seems like there's a chance there.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so fucked up.
Funny. Never a dull day in crypto. There's some alpha in all this chaos, though.
This industry is
it's so
just-
fucked.
it's just so bad. It's so bad.
I don't know if you guys saw, but you probably didn't because it's a little bit of a nuance. But I saw like the revenue generated by the base layer in this time frame, and it looks like it was about 80 million or so in annualized, and this is net. By
So
the
that's
way,
that's like a profit that goes to Coinbase, the company.
yeah.
Yay! Well, that's
So-
material.
Yeah, we've been talking about coin stock a lot in the last few months, and it's done quite well. And one of the things we pointed out was this launch of this layer 2 base, because when this happened months ago, the announcement, the stock did nothing. It was very apparent that Wall Street either was not paying attention or didn't think anything was here. So that's like interesting. Like 85 million a year in revenue is nothing to scoff at. And this is
nothing at all.
pre.
Yeah. I mean, this
This
a
is
big
just
deal.
people gambling on.
So I'm
on
looking forward to tomorrow.
shitcoins.
Tomorrow they're going to report earnings, and I'm wondering to what extent they talk about the launch of Base and this, net revenue run rate that you're describing. Like, are they going to talk about it on their call? Probably. I mean, if it's profitable to the business. I mean, I think everyone's expecting their revenues to be lower just because trading volumes have been down, and they got smacked with like something from the SEC saying you can't trade any coins except for Bitcoin.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Which they did not comply with, right? Didn't he say that if I had complied to this, it just would have been the end of crypto in America?
Yeah.
Which I agree with. He's right.
Is this going to show up in next quarter's earnings?
Well, I just wonder if they talk about it, like if they talk about it on the call, like, they report the last quarter's earnings in the numbers, but then they also talk about their forward guidance.
Well, I'm curious about that. Yeah. But you're thinking they may forward guide.
Yeah.
like,
and they'll clearly talk about
okay.
what's going on in their company that, obviously you want to.
They might want to like not really talk about it that much, since like the first use case of their chain was to basically steal a bunch of money
rug.
from.
Yeah.
So, not a good look for us. Yeah, one more thing that I mentioned here, because I think there's some good alpha in here, is we saw a lot of people announcing that they were filing for an Ethereum futures ETF today and yesterday. This was kind of like the hot thing on the market, and people wondering, why is this the case? Why is there suddenly this like push for like an Ethereum futures ETF? I think the prevailing theory is that like the SEC basically just has no legal leg to stand on in allowing a Bitcoin futures ETF and not allowing an Ethereum futures ETF, because the ETF itself is just like a wrapper for the CME futures, right? It doesn't even have anything to do really with like there's no coins in the ETF. Like if you buy the Bitcoin ETF, you're just buying futures that are traded and already approved by the CME, who's been listing Bitcoin futures for a while. So that's interesting. That could be a big bullish catalyst for Ethereum. And then the thing we saw in the market today that was interesting was that the Grayscale Ethereum product, ETH, which is a kind of like the cousin to GBTC, that was up I think 7, 8, 9% today at one point, while Ethereum was down. So the market is kind of pricing in a closing of those two things. And that's like an interesting trade if you have like a lot of money in a TradFi account, you want exposure to crypto. I think this morning buying ETH was like equivalent to basically buying Ethereum at like $1,100. Like it trades at an enormous
Really?
discount.
Huge
so that discount should just go whoop if like this ends up getting approved. So yeah, Grayscale Ethereum could be an interesting play if you're kind of bullish on both Ethereum and this sort of ETF thing blowing over and us getting an ETH futures ETF?
I think kind of like yes and no, because there is opportunity there, but the risk is so high.
Yeah, how
I'd
high
like,
do you assign that risk?
too high for me. I'd rather just
Yeah.
like own ETH spot, you know,
Got
like
it.
the actual coin. I would rather
Only a gambling amount would be worthwhile.
for me,
for
but
this,
but
right.
I also
But
see
that gambling amount's just for what? For the sake of a discount.
but
Doesn't feel worth
to
it.
Steven's
It's like a
point, it's
40% discount. though.
imagine
It
if
is
you're
a large discount.
okay, yeah, true. I mean, you get compensated for that risk, but like
Yeah.
like you also get compensated for owning ETH just by owning the spot. So like I would be okay just owning spot. I think like what you mentioned on the future side, like I'm not interested in the futures product. I wouldn't buy it. But I think what it represents to me is like sort of like crypto fighting back and like sort of on the front lines, like capturing a little bit more land, you know, like they're like pressing against, and that represents something bullish to me. Not necessarily, I don't want to own like
nobody
futures.
really should buy these futures ETFs
Yeah.
because you have this kind of bleed that happens because every month the futures contracts roll over and they're usually priced at a premium. So every single month you're just eating that over and over and over again. Like if you look at the return over time of like buying the Bitcoin futures ETF or Bitcoin futures versus just buying Bitcoin, it's like a huge drag. Like you vastly, this is similar to what happens if you try to buy oil by buying like USO or whatever. It's the same exact concept. So it's not a good thing for people to buy ETH, but I think it is like a stepping stone to an actual Ethereum spot ETF at some point in the future, which is why I think this is really cool. And I think the price action today is interesting because it shows there's like, it's like a lot of, I think, like institutional money to some degree that's coming in and wants exposure to the space. And the hopium, I think, is that they're just not buying spot right now because there's just like this regulatory uncertainty with Binance. There's not a lot of liquidity in the market because a lot of the market makers have been driven out with all the craziness that's happened.
And it's hard to do. It's hard to do from like a custodial perspective to like actually buy real spot ETH, you know, in like TradFi accounts.
Yeah, let's just answer Noah's question. We can move on. He's just saying, what's the downside to ETH? What's the failure case? I don't think there's really a failure case. I think the downside is effectively that your money is trapped in this trust, and like there's no way to sort of exchange the shares of the trust for actual ETH in the same way that you can exchange like shares of like the GLD gold trust for like actual gold. Like that arbitrage doesn't exist. So it's kind of like this one-way door right now.
I mean, that's the most tangible risk, but I also think if you like give your money to a company that may go bankrupt, you know, Grayscale or, you know, the company that is above Grayscale, it's like you give them your money for some promise in the future. It's like, it's not certain that you're going to see that again.
I don't think that's, I mean, not a lawyer, so please don't take this seriously. But like, I don't think that's like a huge risk. I think the main risk is that your money gets locked up into perpetuity and then you're paying these guys a 2% annualized management fees. So that's like a huge drag. So if you think that's going to take 10 years for this to resolve, then you're basically losing automatically like 20-25% of your return. You know, you can kind of see why that might be reflected into the price. So yeah, interesting play if anybody wants to make it. What do you guys got?
You go.
Are you sure? Okay. So I was I was a DGen this week, as far as DGen things go for me. First and foremost, I tried to execute a few crypto purchases, did a little shopping.
How'd that go?
It took like 4.5 hours to do like 4 things. It was so absurd. It was just so absurd, annoying.
Because
and
the blockchain was congested, or
unplugging it and plugging it back in?
I wish that it would be
blow
as
into the
simple as,
cartridge.
like, blowing in the cartridge, and you know, honestly, I was just joking. Like before we started recording, it was easier to like do torrents and all that kind of stuff 20 years ago than it is to do.
So it's like a UX problem.
It's a UX and UI problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like the simplest stuff is just so obscenely difficult because you have all these different assets on different chains, on different layers of chains, and it's just impossible. And every app seems to want to try to fix this. I don't know if you guys saw, like MetaMask has bridging now. I noticed this while I was trying to resolve all of my issues yesterday, but That's not the alfalfa. The alfalfa here is so you guys may have seen or heard that crypto dick butts. I can't believe I'm even saying this.
Wow, we're so
CBDs.
We're so back.
Crypto dick butts. So
Talking about dick butts again.
very important preface here. I know that people are absolutely over NFTs, but I like that because this is the time that I want to do my shopping for tokens, for NFTs, for everything. Like I want people to be so over it that there is no market for these things. And that's exactly what we're experiencing in particular in NFTs right now, in crypto in general, right? Like there just hasn't been much to talk about other than catastrophes and the occasional positive sign. But then that positive sign goes from one moment, like we're back, to like the next minute, it's like, oh my God, this industry is so immature to the bald thing. But this week I decided a few things. When the news came out about Series 4 crypto butts coming out, really, it's like in our minds, it's Series 2 because you've only ever known one CBD, crypto dick butt. I'm going to try and prevent myself from saying crypto dick butt all day long.
CDBs?
So there's really like
like
one in your mind, but they're basically like 3 series. The first one was like 50 of them, and then another 100 of them, and then another 5,000.
They look the same.
They're all the same basically, but. So there's a new. So here's what got announced. The guy just comes on Twitter, Daddy or Didi or whatever, the owner of this, and he's like, basically, I'm handing the keys over. I'm doing this mint. Whoever owns the most across all seasons takes control of the whole project. In a nutshell, gets the Discord.
It's kind of funny.
Gets the Twitter. Gets everything. And I think gets like one treasury vote. That part was like a little bit unclear. Like, do they get all the assets, like everything? I think they do get most of it, and I think they get a treasury seat. So the way the community responded to this was just like, oh, this is just another rug, like just an eloquent rug. He's over it. He's walking away, cashing out,
It's kind of
diluting
cool
everybody.
exit strategy.
Yeah, it's a nice little exit strategy. Dilute everybody, all the holders, and basically hand the keys over to somebody else and not have to deal with any of this shit from a regulatory perspective, from a responsibility perspective, whatever.
Yeah,
and I
smart.
saw the community itself, which by the way has no diversity in terms of ownership. The actual number of unique owners is so low in this. But that was also another thing I kind of liked about it is like we've talked about crypto dick butts before in the sense that there's like a similar thing going on with them and punks and MFers. And I think that so they were at like 1.5 ETH when this got announced, and it dumped. It dumped to like, maybe it was a little less than 1.5. I don't remember exactly, but it dumped to like 0.6. So I got some. And then I checked out the mint, and the mint was happening for 0.065. And the mint, for those of you that saw it, if you haven't seen it, I don't know if you can still play the game, but one person tweeted that this is the best first-person shooter since like Doom or something like that. Like it was actually an incredible game.
So you play
that
a
you had
game
to play to mint,
to get the mint.
to mint the NFTs.
Wow.
And the way you can't mint the NFTs if you don't win the game and get to the place where you're killing a Sam Bankman-Fried baby. You're killing an SBF baby
It's
to
dark.
mint. It's super dark. The whole thing was really
Is it
dark.
SBF before he becomes SBF, or is it like a baby with SBS's face?
I don't know.
That's like that sounds like the old like would you go back in time and kill baby Hitler thing.
Oh my
I think
god.
you're overthinking it.
Yeah, I like that though.
It's a thought
So,
exercise.
Unclear. Maybe some people decided not to kill the baby. I understand. So anyway, incredible minting process, and I minted it, and I mean CBDs are up.
So you still
We're
had your
back to
gaming
an E.
chops. That's
Yeah,
surprising.
I couldn't believe it. It took me a minute to figure it out. I was
To like win that game.
playing on the keyboard, like W,
Yeah.
move left, right, all this stuff, which one does what. And everything in the game was like, there were all these little secrets. Like you could shoot at something and it would cause something to happen. The point of this is that people are so over this, and it's so diluted at this point because they just added another 6,000 NFTs to the project. But the fact that crypto dick butts like went down, came back up, are holding strong, doesn't have a lot of unique ownership, but I see it as one of those things that might have like long-term holding power. And total degen play probably will go to zero like every other NFT. Not financial advice, but I wanted them.
Just to edify you there, like I was a CryptoPunk holder at one time, and there was like this like WhatsApp thread with all punk holders. Steven's a punk holder, so he's probably in that.
Yeah.
But like these are all like the who's who
Big
of
crossover.
yeah, like everybody who's in that punks thread like also owns dick butts. So
Yeah.
like to me, it seemed like a good play at some point where I was like, yeah, I'd buy some dick
Dude,
butts.
I think there's only like 500 or 1,000 people that own like a dick butt.
so.
Like it's a small number.
What's happened to the floor? Like you said,
It's back up,
to
you know, to
'cause
like
you-
1 ETH.
to an ETH. Okay,
So I mean, it's nice because I got in at like 0.6 something.
that's great.
Already made money on it. Again, no telling. Like could go to zero, but yeah. And then I got a bunch of the new ones because you could mint up to 100 of them.
Damn.
Yeah, but in NFT land, it only took them 3 days to mint or something like that. Which these days, like that's really short because there's nobody in this. There's nobody doing anything anymore. So anyway, I did that, and then I bought some Solana, shoved in, and I bought some Flow, and I put of the amount I wanted to put in, I put 65% towards Solana, and 35% toward Flow, and these are two things that I wanted to own outside of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I'm happy about it. I'm looking at this as a long-term kind of play here, and I hope to be able to cycle out of Flow in particular is like 40x from its all-time highs. Like it's down that much. I think at its peak it was in the
down 97.5%.
something, you know, almost 100%. It's at like 58 cents, and I think at its peak it was like in the $40 range, $50 range. And then of course Solana, we've talked about it, you know the story. But I felt it was time to get in there, and yeah, I hope to be able to cycle out of these and get back into more Bitcoin, Ethereum. That's the plan. That's the plan.
It's like a faster horse, and then
Yeah.
you go back into like a
That's the plan.
safer horse.
I
I
wish
guess.
And if I
wish
lose,
you the
I
best
lose.
of luck on your Flow.
But yeah, well, you're the one that talked about Flow, and now you want to get into.
I talked about
intricacies of-
buying Flow as a trade with a tight stop
This is not
loss
my
of
first time
$1.10,
buying
and
Flow, by the
then
way.
when like I was like, this thing is going to zero. Have fun.
You never said that.
It's
You say that right now because I say I bought Flow. It's very convenient.
no. When you told me you
No.
were going to buy Flow
No.
2 weeks ago, I was like, please don't buy Flow.
2 weeks ago, I've been buying Flow for a long time.
Yeah,
This
I
was the
also
first
said
time
it
I
to you a
went
long time ago.
Harder. I was like, okay, I like this price range. But you're the one that on the pod. Don't make me pull it up on the transcript.
Yeah,
you're the one that
as
talks
a
about it.
trade, and in the context of it, I was probably like, this thing is probably still going to zero, but it might
Okay, so
double
what's
first.
wrong with doing the same thing? I'm doing the same exact thing.
I don't know. I just like
I'm playing it the same way. It might be going to zero.
I know, but I just think if you just want to buy a generic like exposure to NFT type play, like I would way rather buy like Blur. I think is like kind of broad exposure
I mean,
to
there's
a
an
bunch
infinite
of stuff.
number of shitcoins that we could do.
No,
the
there's
same
not.
thing
There's actually very few coins I think you can legitimately buy to get broad exposure to NFTs. It's actually an interesting problem
with.
because
It's not about the exposure to NFTs for me. It's just something that I think
we're just
like,
throwing darts at a dartboard
yeah,
for
partly.
altcoins.
Yeah,
We
Not
should
with
get
Solana,
that
but
by the
with-
way. We should just throw
Get a
dart.
dartboard.
All
with
right,
a bunch
we're
of shit coins on
buying
it.
Bobcoin. All right.
I'm not
I
mad at that
mean,
idea. Like
Harry
like,
Potter, Obama, Sonic, Inu.
I mean, people made $500,000 buying Bald. That's literally. The
Did you
same thing.
Did you see that I got a chart request in the Discord today to chart Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic, Inu coin? I didn't even make that up. It's an actual coin.
I did not.
Sounds legit.
I did not.
I know. My life. If my mom only knew.
So
Anyway, well, look, I'm not going to hate on your thing. I'm
you
a
are
big
hating on it. You are hating on it hardcore. That's what you do, Steven. Sometimes that's what you do.
Look, I'm
This is
just
exactly what you do. When
I-
it's your
I
move,
just don't
It's like the smartest thing in the world.
want
and
you to
you're-
light
and you're
35% of your money on fire.
35% of my money. How do you know it was? Maybe it was $3.
You just told me you put 65%
No,
in
35% of his
35% in
desired
Fly.
allocation.
Yeah, your money, your desired allocation.
Okay, well, I mean, you guys. This is the funny thing to me. Everyone degens at the peak of the bull run
sensitive.
when there's nothing left to gain, and then now when you want to degen, it's like the wrong time. And this is the right time, in my opinion. This is the right time that you degen, especially if you're willing to hold on to these things for a period of time going into the next bull market. This is when I want to accumulate those things. This is when I want to play these bets. Not when there's euphoria and it's like I'm chasing. I don't want to chase.
Yes, right time. Maybe wrong coin.
You don't believe in fundamentals, and now suddenly you believe in the fundamentals of the coin?
I believe in fundamentals. I fundamentally
What? You guys argue about this every week.
I fundamentally believe that almost all of these things are going to zero.
That's no. You're doing this circle thing on me right now.
That is
dude.
that is what we call a foundational principle.
Yes or no? Disagree with me if you like, but do you not? Isn't he?
What are
Mr.
the fundamentals of?
Isn't he Mr.
flow?
Charter?
Well, obviously. I mean, obviously he's Mr. Charter, but I don't think he ignores the fact that there are reasons to buy something as well as candles.
You guys have specifically discussed that the reasons do not matter. The only thing that matters is the chart.
Do you see me buying every random coin,
No.
or do I have like a few coins where I'm like, I'm gonna buy this as a spot buy for the bull? I will trade anything, but like trading to me is different than like I'm gonna buy this and hold it for 1 to 3 years and then maybe like offload it.
Okay, I
want to maximize my chance.
I am not going to get
He will
into
not-
the
he
moves
will
that
not
you
take
make.
this.
I'm not. This is a whole topic that I'm moving on.
I like the dick butts. I like dick butts play.
No,
I'm like,
moving on.
I've been wanting.
I like your dick butts play. Just take the W.
I've been
No,
wanting a dick
I don't
butt.
need a W
Love
or
dick
an L.
butts.
What I need is like I'm sharing my alfalfa. It's my alfalfa. Like that's it.
So this is
That's fucking it. Like there's
so this is a
nothing
good
else.
segue actually, because like, I think you accurately portrayed Steven and I as like a sort of like a traditional investor, and then like a charter, right? That I think everybody knows that that's where we sit in our stations, but I think of them as tools, not as like this is your hard and fast way. So like I've been trying to like understand charting better, and I talked to you guys about going through ICT's YouTube tutorials and stuff to try to understand that tool more. And something I want to talk about with you guys is like, let's say we're in a bull market now, right? And like before it was a bear market, and bear market is potentially over. Like something that I'm seeing on like high time frames, Steven, I'm seeing up only, which would signify that it would validate you that like we're in a bull market again. But I don't think that bull markets, similar to bear markets, they don't go in a straight line. But we have been going in a straight line since January, essentially. And
Some markets.
yeah. So I'm thinking about NASDAQ mostly.
Yeah.
And like when I look at NASDAQ, the chart on like a weekly time frame, when I look at the weekly NASDAQ, it is literally every week green for 6 months.
Feels bad, man.
And when I look at this, I'm also seeing that like we're going to like seasonal weakness, right? Like August, September is kind of like a soft time for risk assets, on a calendar perspective. Plus we have like things that ICT talks about. Like there's a lot of fair value gaps below us. There's a lot of like room, I think, for a retrace. So even if this is a bull market, like we could go lower. And
Are you talking about crypto, or are you talking about everything?
I'm kind of talking about everything, but like NASDAQ is sort of my leading indicator for this. But like
you're saying like we moved up so quickly, like price didn't really have a chance to find any sort of balance. It just kind of went straight up.
And even if this is a bull market, that we could see like a better buying opportunity in the near term, like in the next 2 months, just based on like my limited understanding of the charts as I'm like trying to broaden my perspective and like, get better at using these other tools. I'm like, wow, well, as I look at this stuff, it's like maybe now kind of is chasing when you look at it at a certain time frame. Have you looked at that?
Yeah, I've thought that TradFi stocks look a little sketchy. We hit some kind of key levels in the NASDAQ and S&P last week, like key weekly levels, and we kind of price went above them and failed to hold and broke down a little bit, and that's usually like a sign of weakness. Like you don't.
It literally looked like a liquidity grab of like
there.
the previous highs. It's like, oh, thanks, take that, and then now we'll
Yeah,
like take
like
below.
I'm not buying stocks right now. Like I think that I'm still kind of longer term bullish on them. I'm kind of short term, but if we do get like a dip in stocks, I would buy it in the fall.
That's what I'm saying. I think that's where I'm like what I'm alluding to, and I'm looking for better entries, but I want to be bullish here, like particularly in the assets I've already talked about. I want to buy ETH, I want to buy Optimism, I want to buy Arbitrum, and I want to buy good stocks that I feel comfortable with. But my alfalfa for this week is like what I've been really looking into is like, what are the ramifications of the superconductor if this is a real thing? Like what could potentially benefit from this being real?
Yeah. So that was another thing I did this week, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to jump the gun.
Right, but I'm using this as like a transition. You know, like
it's a good transition.
Yeah. So I know we want to talk about this on a broader scale. So like I obviously approach it from a money perspective, but can you guys, one of you guys,
do you want to give some background?
Yeah, maybe
what
like
the hell's happening?
Lead into what we're talking about here, like.
Yeah, so this has been like kind of an interesting meta question to me. I'm like, this has consumed my life for the last like 4 days, and I'm actually been curious of like, does anybody else like outside of my little bubble, are they even thinking about this? Do they even know what's happening? And the answer seems to be no, not a clue. So end of last week, there was this Korean team that published a paper basically sort of insinuating that they had produced some material which could be construed as like a sort of a room temperature semiconductor. Superconductor. My God, I already blew it. Too much wine. Anyway, do you guys know what a superconductor is?
We do now.
You do now? Look at you.
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest with you, this entire conversation was foreign to me up until this event, where I'm like, okay, beginning my research of like, what the fuck is a superconductor and why does it matter?
Yeah. Well, I guess you have to first establish what is a conductor, right?
Yeah.
Electricity. We'll just do this like super high level. So conductor is something where electrical charge flows through it pretty easily, and then you have materials that are insulators and they resist the sort of flow of electrical charge. Metals tend to be good at this. Like a lot of our wire is copper. Electrons can flow through these types of substances really easily, and they're really good at conducting electricity. But one of the problems you have when electricity flows through wires is you encounter something called resistance. Like electrons don't flow through smoothly; they bump into each other. They lose energy, and that energy is dissipated as heat, and then the system itself sort of loses energy, right? And you see this like with power lines. This is like a huge problem with like electricity. It's like really hard actually to take electricity, make it somewhere, and then transport it somewhere else because you have a lot of loss along the way. Like battery technology is very difficult because you lose a lot of energy in the process. Like it's actually like a huge it's a huge problem in like a lot of areas. So a superconductor is interesting. It's like a material where like the electrons, instead of sort of like bumping into each other and dissipating and losing energy, like they sort of like pair up and they just go through smoothly. So you can have electricity flow through something and just have basically like no loss.
Zero loss of energy, yeah.
Which has like insane, implications depending on like the degree to which the material actually conducts.
So superconductors do exist already, right? Prior to this sort of like development, superconductors do exist, right?
What do you mean by do exist?
Well, like we can create a material that is superconductive.
Yeah, we have superconductors. The problem with them tends to be that they have to operate at an extraordinarily low temperature. Yeah. Think like negative 180 degrees Fahrenheit or something.
You need like liquid
nitrogen. And then oftentimes at like extremely high pressure. So if you have really high pressure, like the type of pressure you have like underneath the ocean and the submarine that exploded, or you have like really cold temperatures or some combination of the two, it like enhances it allows these materials to be superconductors, but at room temperature they're not. And this is like a problem because like you can't have power lines at like negative 200 degrees. It's just not practical. So we have them, we know they exist, but like the applications of them are like super niche because we can't use them at room temperature. So that's kind of like the key here is that this is a superconductor that may operate at close to room temperature.
So these 3 Korean guys, they were able to like design a specific alloy that has these superconductivity properties without that cold or pressure caveat.
And can I nudge this along a little bit? So I think it's like there's obviously a debate about like, did they actually do it? Is it repeatable? And there's a lot of attention around that. And we don't want to dig into that because that's not our area of expertise.
Yes.
And of course, I think what's really interesting here is like, well, what are the ramifications of this? What does it mean for society? What does it mean for your finances? What are the potential trades that you
how do
can
you play
make?
it? Yeah.
How do you play it? And what does it mean for everything, geopolitically, our future, technology? And that's where things are really, really interesting. And if anything, I think that this thing is in its own little bubble right now, as Stephen was saying, like amongst just, our little echo chamber.
Totally.
But if this is what we think it is, we're going to go through this conversation as if it is. And I think we also go through this conversation as, even if it is not, it is an inevitability. I mean, there was news of this in March. There was news of this in June. Like, this is something that scientists are investing a lot of time, research, and money into. So I view it as an inevitability. We'll eventually get there. So let's play the conversation as if we're going to eventually get there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I want people to like grasp
It's not
that
like
this
sit
is
here
like
and-
this is like a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, if this were to happen, this is like on par
So
with
let's
like the
describe why
invention
it's
of like
such a
the
big deal.
transistor
Yeah,
semiconductor.
I mean, why is this a big deal? Like, here, I'm curious what you guys have learned. I mean, I am absolutely, new to this, but, power grids, first of all, we lose a lot of heat because of the resistance, right? So heat lost is like tremendous. There's a tremendous amount of heat loss that is like equivalent to like certain amount of countries' energy, other countries, small countries' energy. So this reduces the cost. It makes wind and solar much more efficient. So it's very bullish for sustainability and renewable energy. Climate change, it reduces gas emissions. On a national level, I kind of approached my research on this as like, how does it approach us on a national level? How does it approach us technologically? How does it affect us financially? And then what are just any risks, in general? Like, what are the downside, of all of this? And then what does the future look like? So with, on a national level, the countries that get access to this first, it'll be very interesting to see who does get access to this first, assuming again that this is repeatable and access to, I think, a strong R&D budget is something I was thinking about, and strong manufacturing is going to have a huge advantage. So superpower countries are going to get a huge head start, and getting a head start with something like this is like, I mean, it's a completely, different game that you'll be in. I mean, you'll be far, far away from every other country if you're a first mover. If you have regulatory agility to be able to move this forward in a way that actually is like works with your governments and regulation agencies to be able to build quickly. Economic influence. So this is another thing. OPEC, for example, right? With oil, influences oil prices. So if we have a handful of countries that are first movers toward this, it'll be very interesting to see how they might exert certain types of control. But these are just things at a national level and more geopolitically. I'm curious, like, what were the biggest things that stood out to you guys in terms of how this might be used and the areas that you think it'll impact us the most? I've been thinking about this a lot.
I think the most interesting area is probably in the realm of, like, I don't know how likely it is we get there immediately, but over the longer time horizon, like fusion energy.
Mm-hmm.
So fusion, like a lot of our nuclear power right now is like fission, where you're splitting the atom, but there's also like a tremendous release of energy when you fuse atoms. I think this is how the hydrogen bomb operated. It was like a they use like a nuclear like a fission device to cause like a fusion reaction. They take like two hydrogen isotopes and basically smush them together, and then it creates this massive release of energy. The problem with fusion reactions, as I understand it, is like you're working with plasma, which is basically like superheated gas. Anything plasma touches just is like incinerated, right? So the way they contain plasma is they use like magnetic fields. There's just like ball of plasma and like a reactor basically being held up by magnetic fields. But creating those magnetic fields is super energy intensive. And in doing so, with like the stuff we have right now, we just have massive loss. So we can create these reactions, but we can't create them in a way where we get more energy out than we put in. So superconductors would enable us to basically contain that reaction in like a far more cost-effective manner. And like that would be just, you want to talk about crazy stuff. Like imagine a world where energy is basically just infinitely abundant. Like that's a world we can't imagine today. It's like the most critical thing to our lives right now, other than like water and food, really. And it's something that is kind of scarce, and it's a source of a lot of strife in the world.
Like wars
and
are fought over this.
And the way we make energy right now also kind of hurts the environment, whereas this would not. It would be such a massive game changer.
Definitely.
The part that, go ahead.
Well, I kind of look at it from a different angle, so I don't want to derail, your framework of going from national, whatever.
No, that was just the way I was thinking about it in my head, but it helps me think linearly.
Yeah. I think the way that I'm sort of framing it in my mind is like, you said let's not dissect the validity of these three Koreans' achievements, but I think it's important to analyze maybe the probability of it. So like, let's just say that this one is the final solution. Well, then you have raw material inputs that go into this, and their raw materials were like lead, copper, phosphorus, and they heated them up and combined them. So like those three inputs obviously would get much higher demand. But like where I land on this probably is like, I think these guys discovered something profound, but like they're not the final solution. So I think like what they really did is kind of like triggered the global mind share to be like, holy shit, like we were thinking about this in a different way. You guys sort of unlocked something. Like maybe it's like a different combination of inputs. Like maybe it's like lead, gold, and phosphorus or something, and you can kind of like continue to iterate on that. But my framework is always sort of financial based. So like the way that I think about this is like, how can we all sort of like predict a future that has, superconductivity as a part of it, and how do we as individuals benefit? So what I think is like, I just think of the supply chain. I think starting from raw materials to fabrication to tech companies that ultimately deliver products to the end user.
Yeah. And
like I think about investment strategies at each point along the way.
Okay. So what do you got?
Happy to talk about it. Like I think if we take the three that the original.
Could you explain where we think, like, before we agree on like before we dissect like what the financial plays are, can we agree like what the industries, so like your supply chain methodology I think is very good. So like what industries will be most impacted?
Like what does it solve first?
Like I'm curious what you guys came up with.
So like with that, I think of it in two different components. I think you guys accurately identified both. One is like the conductivity, meaning like the passing of electrons in a very efficient manner. And then you also have this like magnetic byproduct component. And I think in both cases, they're incredibly useful. I think the one that is like most easily tangible and identifiable is that conductivity component, where it's just like, I was talking to my buddy who's an engineer at Qualcomm, and like literally his entire job is to create max throughput of like electrical components, meaning like all you want to do is have electrons move in a lossless way to your end state. And his point was like, if this superconductive material exists, then we basically just like increase our bandwidth of data transfer by orders of magnitude that we can't even fathom. So this would improve like AI, AR, VR, all of this like sort of futuristic world that we can kind of see with our eyes already, that like becomes a reality. But then I think the magnetism component is even more dreamy, because that part creates a world that we're not even familiar with. Like I know Steven talked about the nuclear fission component of magnetism, but like what my buddy Alan was talking about, he's like, imagine a world where you use magnetism. Imagine a world where everything levitates. Like that's basically his like starting point. He's saying something like along the lines of like, if you like just take a car, for instance, take a car as you understand it now, you have that battery component, and this battery will go like very long extended live based on just the efficiency of the electron transfer. But then now imagine like the mechanics change, because like you can actually have an axle affect a wheel. Like you can have an axle affect a wheel without ever touching it.
Yeah.
So it's like that becomes so efficient, because like if you use magnetism from an axle to a tire, then the tire still spins, but they never actually touch. Just magnetically, it
made me think about Hyperloop.
Yeah, Hyperloop is for sure a certainty under this scenario, but like that's confined by like a fixed track, you know. Mm-hmm. But like you can just like have sort of like your own vehicle that moves.
Everything would utilize this technology.
Yeah, everything utilizes technology, and I think that magnetism side of it, we like our imagination is the only limitation, because I can't even imagine a world where nothing touches, but it ultimately is affected by.
Wait, so you're saying instead of a world where we have physical things like connecting to each other, it would be better in a lot of ways to, push, pull, and distribute force via magnetism. We don't do that right now because it's extraordinarily energy inefficient to generate those magnetic fields. But if this happens, then it's not, and then maybe all of these engines and parts are just
floating. Yeah, and like his point was like anything that you need to rotate, like right now, it uses friction. But like in that world, friction is eliminated, and now everything becomes more efficient. And it's like this has ramifications that we cannot even conceive.
Like all of the energy in the world we use to do that, where a huge chunk of that is normally lost to heat, basically.
Yeah.
Now is not lost and doesn't have to be created in the first place because it's not lost, or it can be used to do other stuff.
But it's much easier to dream on the first component, which is just like being able to transfer electricity efficiently. So like I don't know which one, we can talk about both, but like in my opinion, like from like an investment thesis, like one of those, like the conductivity component is much more investable now than this like magnetism component, which is like you're literally dreaming on like.
So I want to get into like the financial plays here, but before we do, I do want to kind of talk about like the technological implications this has. And I just still feel like we're in the middle of the conversation, but I don't think we've done a good job of expressing what a fundamentally monumental thing this is. Again, you can sit there and debate if this is the one and this is the event, but I view it as an inevitability. And I think that it did not occur to me how fundamental of a change this is technologically. This really is like an industrial revolution, the next industrial revolution.
You know what a big thing we haven't even mentioned yet is quantum computing.
So
right?
Thank you. You always do that, by the way. We're on the same page when it comes to that stuff.
I like when we're in sync.
No, we're in sync. So I want to discuss the technological implications of this, because I think we're not digging into enough what a transformative technology this actually is. So
let's use a simple analogy, because I was thinking about this too, and I think the analogy for me is like when Marconi invented the radio. I don't think he envisioned that all of us, years later, have a supercomputer in our pocket that's untethered, that we can access every piece of information that's ever been created. Like one thing that sort of like, capturing of radio waves led to life as we know it now. This to me feels like that.
That's a very good analogy.
Transformational, and we can't even comprehend the way that life looks, because of what this unlocks.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about that, Stephen. Like, so there's a few big things that come out of this for me. It's like supercomputers, AI, accelerating ML algorithms, climate modeling, financial modeling, by the way, and drug discovery are like some big ones that really stood out to me. But just on this point of like supercomputers. So quantum computers are going to be more scalable as a result of this. And This is incredibly exciting for so many reasons. Like quantum computing is still very infant, as I understand it, right? It is very difficult to scale. It's very difficult to repeat. It's very sensitive. It's very, it requires the same components the same issues that we've had with achieving the superconductor. We experience that same.
I think one of the problems, right, is that like it's very sensitive to you have a computer and you have like a fan and you have to cool it. And on the quantum level, that's even more like of an issue. You have to have these things like very, very cold, is my understanding.
Yeah. So like the qubits, the quantum bits, right? They've needed near zero temperatures, which is difficult and expensive. And I mean,
it would be like having like a CPU in your computer that does the calculations. You don't need a fan because it doesn't give off any heat like that. There's no resistance.
So this makes it possible. This makes it more possible. It doesn't mean that it's like an overnight thing that occurs just because we have a superconductor, but it makes the research in quantum computing and the progress that will occur in quantum computing much more likely that we make that scalable. And what does that mean? I mean, like classical systems are zeros and ones. This is zeros, ones, or both, right? So it's like the amount of complexity that can occur, especially in things like AI, is where I'm really, really excited. So you've got accelerating machine learning algorithms leading to just generally smarter systems. And I think the financial modeling thing for you guys is going to be very interesting because it's like, if you start to think about this, it's like trading on crack.
Is the reason this is possible because like a quantum computer can just perform so many more raw calculations per like orders of magnitude more, and we can kind of simulate things that we can't simulate now. Like we can talk about this later, but like one of the things with cryptography, right, is that like it can't be cracked because we can only do X number of guesses per second to break the code, but like a quantum computer might be able to crack these algorithms in a very reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. You can look at things more probabilistically, right? It's like this whole Schrodinger thing, like Schrodinger's equation, and like being able to look at things probabilistically in a quantum way means that I don't quite know exactly where the dog is in the house, but if I needed to find the dog in the house, I'm able to use quantum like mechanics to narrow down an area of the house. I'm using an example analogy here to go like, that's where this is occurring. But that's the same thing that occurs with AI. Like a large language model is ultimately doing a lot of things similar to that. If you're trying to calculate an endpoint, calculate an outcome in something, like ultimately you need to parse through an infinite amount, a large amount of data to be able to do these things. So it's going to benefit us in AI tremendously. And I've been thinking about, okay, if NVIDIA was so bullish for AI because of the GPUs, if room temperature superconductors, RTS we'll call it, what companies will benefit the most from this? Publicly traded companies, stocks that I could buy. And the company that is, if we can shift into this a little bit, the company that is like most well-suited that I've found is IBM. IBM is the #1 leader and investor in quantum computing. They are so ready for this more than anybody else. And if you look at their stock, I mean, I'm not a charter, but if you look at their stock, like it has not been a sexy stock even over the last decade.
They sort of missed every technological wave. They missed like basically the internet. They missed mobile. They missed they were in on.
They're like the loser of losers.
Yeah.
But this could be huge for them. Huge, because they are literally studying the exact type of quantum bit and a scale. Like this will scale their system, their research. They're at the forefront of it more than Google even. Like Google has a department that is focused on this as well with quantum computing, but IBM invests even more into this, into their research, into the labs, into everything they're doing. They have the product that is poised for this, well suited for this. So it's interesting. I want you guys to dig more into that and what they're doing to see like how this could potentially.
Well, you're kind of like jumping ahead a little bit for me because like my plan was to sort of like talk about, like you mentioned NVIDIA, and as it pertains to AI, I think it's like a pretty good proxy where you see like how value accrues to an industry in like a waterfall, like where you start with like the ones that are selling the picks and the shovels, and then it like falls down to the app layer or whatever years down the road. Like the way that I see this happening with like the superconductor, it's like first you start with raw materials. Like the raw materials is the first input.
But are they rare materials? Like, are they rare earth materials? My understanding is they're
no,
not.
but if like the demand goes off the chart, then like
Yeah.
the price of lead does what, and the price of copper does what,
Yeah.
and like all these things actually are very valuable
Sure.
in the near term. So I like for me, the way that I would look to trade, the way that I look to play it. First of all, trade and invest in it are two different things. Like we talked about this in the Discord. Just a quick aside, like Steven was saying in the Discord, like let's look at some like certain narrative plays, like these little like shit companies that like have quantum computing in the name that we can just buy and like quickly flip out of. And I think it was Eric Puncher in the Discord who was like, that they aren't going to be the ultimate winner. It's like, that's not the point. Like you can trade a narrative differently than you can like invest in a value accrual mechanism over years, right? So I'll just ignore trading for now. I'll focus on like the value investing style. Value investing style for me looks like this. If this is real, then like the raw material inputs are going to become much more valuable.
Yeah.
So that'd be mining companies. That'd be like Freeport McMoran, Rio Tinto, Vale, like the massive companies that already mine.
Companies that mine lead specifically, probably.
Yeah, so there's no pure plays in like lead because it was like
Right.
such a commoditized element, but like there are elements that do have pure plays. So like phosphorus is an input to the Korean solution here. And you know there are pure play phosphorus mining companies. Those were specifically designed because phosphorus is used in fertilizers. So if their mines become just immediately more valuable, well, that's a good play. So that would be like potash, agrium, mosaic. I used to live in the prairies of Canada where all of this shit was mined. So like I'm familiar with this stuff. But like you start with like the mining companies,
Yeah.
and then you go to the fabrication. And my understanding of this is like the difficulty is really on the fabrication. Like, how do you take these like three elements and combine them in the specific way and under the specific heat, the specific conditions that create superconductive material? And that sounds hard, you know, like. So for me, that would be like who is really on advanced fabrication now. That's like Taiwan Semi. That's like people that are following the footsteps of Taiwan Semi that are probably U.S. companies. There are like micro caps, small caps that are like.
We're going down the weeds here a little bit, but there's like I think some important nuance here. Like when we talk about investing in AI versus investing in superconductors, like it seems to me like the timeline for superconductors is way longer, right? And there's like kind of nuance in the like not all superconductors are created equal, right? For example, like there's an important limitation, which is like how much current can actually pass through them. One that can withstand like a lot versus little is much more valuable, has more applications, right? And there's a manufacturing process layered on top of that. Like we had a similar challenge in manufacturing semiconductors. It took us like 3-4 decades to get that manufacturing process so precisely nailed down to the point where we have the semiconductors we have today. And the same thing is going to
I think this is more like a 5 to 10 year thing, though. I think we see real world implications and tangible things in 5 years. And I think in 10 years, you see like, whoa, this is drastically changed.
Like maybe
society.
like in the way where we had like the first semiconductor, right? But like the difference between like having like the iPhone today versus the computers that took up like a whole room or whatever.
There will be much
decades
more
ago.
investment that goes in this direction and research that goes in this direction because it's a game-changing technology.
But I think I agree with Steven where it's like when you try to identify sort of like the end tech company that's servicing the end user on something that is so far down the road, it's like increasingly more difficult to do that than it is to like identify sort of like higher up like the supply chain. So for me when I'm talking about like the end case like tech company, the answer to me is simple. It's like the incumbents, like the people, the companies that have the most resources, the best access to brilliant labor, etc. So I feel like Google, Microsoft, IBM is probably a good example of that. It's still like
NVIDIA.
Like we think of IBM as like some failure. It's probably still like, I haven't even looked at it. It's probably $50 billion
for GPUs.
Yeah.
As well.
So all of these
NVIDIA
companies
just got like a double up.
So
as a
all of these
result
companies
this.
probably are the winners of this at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So like if I was going to invest in sort of like the end use case, I would just bet on the incumbents because I think they will all benefit because they have massive advantages of scale, capital, labor.
My understanding is that, well, obviously this is like complicated.
Chips, Intel.
One of the first industries that I think to really benefit, I think, is quantum computing. And some of the geek brains I chat with, as soon as this came out, they were on this, and that was sort of the conclusion that came out. And there's actually, like, it's complicated. There's like certain subsets of quantum computing, like certain ways to do it and certain ways which benefit more than others.
Yeah.
Like superconducting qubits or something.
Right.
It's like
and
the
like, for
subcategory.
example, I learned that Microsoft is investing in a different qubit technology. So they're like off when it comes to this scenario, whereas IBM is directly investing in superconducting qubits of the type that is necessary for this future.
Yeah, like my YOLO play I made last week was a ticker with a company called Rigetti, RGTI, smaller cap play. Not financial advice, but that's like one of the things like I kind of put money in if people want to do their own research and look at that. But that kind of fell into this realm of quantum computing and wasn't like an obvious scam company with like just complete dog shit financials.
So that's a small cap. And just for those following along and that want to participate, Steven shared Rigetti Computing in our Discord. I remember the morning that you did that. And my immediate response was like, oh, like let's look up the options chain on RGTI. I did. And I was
if
like,
you got in that, I should have bought options.
And so
those things
I look at the options chain. I'm like, oh, these are incredibly cheap. Like by that afternoon, those options were up 30% that I was looking at. So like,
Jeez.
there are opportunities out here, and particularly like joining in the Discord is a good way to like find these opportunities.
Okay. Discord, eh?
What a plug.
And I mean, of course, even things like more downstream, but like batteries, EV technology, Tesla is going to benefit from this.
Dude, I think the batteries are even like lower hanging fruit than quantum computing. Like batteries just seem like an easy win.
Yeah. Yeah. But
I think my understanding is that the manufacturing process for this, like the battery, is like it's going to be like it's going to take a bit. But again, not a doctor.
So what do you guys think? Are we satisfied with that, or do you have more financials? Do you have more plays here?
I feel
because I have a question I want to get to if you're ready.
I got one more thing I'm buying.
Okay. Well, I'll plant the seed. I want to know what the future looks like.
Ticker symbol TECK. Tech. It's a miner.
Okay.
Lead.
It's a miner.
Yeah.
Mining
although
that mines lead.
There was by the way, I've been following this on
because the country is very important for this as well. Like that's a big where
they're in Canada. I
okay.
think.
Yeah, Canada has a lot, right?
Yeah. So one of the things I've been doing that I also want to talk about is like I've been glued to X. God, I hate that. Looking at this like since this came out, I've been following this in real time. It's been fascinating. You're seeing this like real time collaboration of scientists trying to replicate these results, and you've got certain accounts who are like way smarter than I am on this, obviously, and they like actually can like read and interpret this data, kind of like live tweeting everything as it's like happening and explaining stuff. And it's moving so fast that even preparing for this episode was like hard. And like right before we went to do this episode, I saw another thing recently came out where like another Chinese team was sort of, there's been this balance between people doing like kind of experiments to replicate it and then also trying to do these theoretical calculations to try to explain, this structure and how it works and like how you could kind of maybe build upon that. And one of the teams was like, this could be greatly improved by using gold instead. Mm-hmm. And that would be wild. Like if that ends up being true and then there's just gold in every single like piece of wiring throughout the world. And that's like an interesting investment thesis because it's not like if you ape into gold, it's gonna like go down if it doesn't happen. It's something you kind of already want to own anyway, but that might be dramatically mispriced because it's not being priced for a world where it has all of this like utility beyond jewelry and some niche like electronic stuff.
I completely agree with you. I think that this like initial iteration by the 3 Koreans is not the final solution,
but it'll be the catalyst
to
attention, energy, dollars,
which will drive
to go in this direction.
The global mind share to
and then
to
Kathy
solve
Wood
it.
will find a way to capitalize on all of it by creating, as Matt in the chat just said, ARC superconductor ETF, which I agree with. It's like there will be someone that groups these companies together in the right way to help you make a lot of money.
And I'd probably short that and buy whatever Steve was talking
You'd be
about.
making a huge mistake because betting against Kathy is fundamentally wrong. Kathy always wins on the right time horizon.
You just like you can't just like bait me right before you try to segue to
Sure
something.
I can.
It's
I can.
ridiculous.
What do you want to talk about?
Oh, I just want to know. I mean, what do you guys think the future looks like with this? I mean, this is a profound upgrade to our species, and there's so many crazy things happening all at the same time. It's like aliens, crypto appears bullish, I don't know. There's just so many wild things happening at the same time. And in particular with this, it's like, if you really sit back and you think about what is required for the singularity to occur, is there any bottleneck at all? We've got AI exploding. The amount of dollars, the amount of smart people working in that space, it's just exploding. So we appear to be closer and closer to artificial general intelligence, AGI, than ever before. OpenAI is talking about gathering a group of people to invest heavily in this space specifically of like, we got to get ready for AGI in the next 2 years level. And then you've got this that's just occurred, which is directly a catalyst for the technological advancements within AI. So, I mean, we just appear from where I'm sitting, moving faster and faster and faster toward the singularity. And the singularity defined as the moment, if you could even define it as a moment, where general superintelligence exceeds the intelligence of a basic organic human being. And we eventually have to merge. Whether we choose to merge or not is a different question, but just that the intelligence itself supersedes our intelligence. So, like, that just appears to be getting pulled forward more and more quickly with stuff like this. And I view it as, like, no coincidence either. It's like Ray Kurzweil sitting there going like, yep, right on time.
I don't want to derail the conversation, but do you think that there's like any correlation between the fact that Congress is talking about aliens and stuff now, and
that's a great question.
And now we have this like novel technology
I don't know
on our
what's
doorstep.
going on with all that.
Dude, people linked the aliens and the LK-99, the superconducting alleged superconducting material on Twitter. They were like the patent for this thing references this Navy UFO patent from the 90s, and people were going crazy on it.
We still have no direct evidence of these aliens, though, right? Like, I mean, it's just someone saying that someone said to them that we have aliens.
So I'm so far removed
And
from any of the
aliens
like
tech.
conspiracy-ness or whatever, but
It's
like
not a conspiracy.
but, like,
this is not a conspiracy.
I'm not that bullish.
but like
on the
in
aliens.
Congress they did talk about aliens. Like they had like a full panel on it.
Yes, this senior person talked about having access to people and information that confirmed to him secondhand that we have alien tech and that we've been hiding it, and he felt the need to become an official whistleblower.
And I think it was his word. Like I don't want to speak his words. I don't know. But like my understanding is that he said there's like two components of that. One is like these flying objects that we have no way of identifying. But then there's also like biological material that's non-human. And I'm like, for that,
Allegedly.
like for that, shouldn't we just talk about that? Like, shouldn't that be pretty shared?
Well,
Like
they've denied it.
So I don't really want to take this down an alien path, but like
I mean, I don't ever mind talking about aliens.
but like the fact that exists at the exact same time this sprouts up is probably got Marty going. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know what to give the alien thing because I still just would like to see the evidence itself, and I'd like us to have discourse about it as a society, and maybe we're getting closer to that. Maybe we're taking steps toward it. I don't know.
2023 might be a wild year in retrospect. Like
It
if we
has
look
been a
back
wild
and we're
year.
like, yeah, that was the year we created AI, basically created the inevitability of AGI. We created superconductors, and also we discovered aliens. And then the stock market kind of went up, and these like idiots were like, "Oh, it's a bear market rally," and then
Yeah.
it went up 20x in the next decade.
Yeah, and imagine being bearish on all this, and like ETH's down still over 50% from its all-time highs. Like it's fucking time to buy, basically.
Well, this whole superconductor thing is incredibly bullish for our economy, right?
The world, like
The world. Yeah. It really is.
It leads us like closer towards like a sort of we've talked a little bit about like what like a post scarcity world looks
Yeah,
like.
protopia.
Like one of the most critical things that we still kind of like kill each other over is energy.
Mm-hmm.
So making that, like, can you imagine if energy was basically just like air?
But the challenge is that it won't be. These things don't come without cost. These things don't come without conflict. And that's also something that
Wait,
I'm
why
thinking
not?
a lot about.
Why not?
Because it's a superpower technology. It will be controlled. It will be held by. It's like if the
Wait, hold on.
ability
I don't
to
understand.
create-
Wait, I don't understand this thesis. Are you saying that like one country is going to figure out how to manufacture this and then like hoard it and then they'll have the tech and nobody else will?
No, not at all. Not one country, but some countries will have an advantage over others. Absolutely. This will
So we're going to like
probably
deglobalize the
increase
supply
the
chain?
wealth gap
Like-
more than anything ever has.
Absolutely, I agree with that, but I don't think it.
Wait.
I don't think
Why?
the logic.
Wait,
I don't
why?
think the logic applies. So like, I think
I'm confused.
to your point, like increasing of the wealth gap, I agree because like I was thinking about this earlier when I said like in my estimation, like the end state of this is like where does the value accrue? It's probably to the incumbents, like the winners of today have like this massive advantage to use this new tech in a
Correct.
way that services customers better than a startup. I think I agree with you
Hold up,
there.
but wouldn't you agree that that hasn't been true throughout history?
I think that's where I'm going with this is like where I disagree is that like when you get like a massive technological shift like the internet that just sort of exists globally, I think people benefit, like the end user benefits. And, you know, there are sort of companies that exist to capture some of that value, but like most of it is just like a end state benefit where it's like,
But you just made an argument that's perfect for this to describe exactly what's going on. The countries that have access to internet are the ones that are the most developed. The ones that are not developed don't have access to internet.
yes.
A
And
but
large
one- but-
percentage of the world is still not online.
Wait, but one of the huge
I don't think that's
issues
true.
is that a lot of these countries can't get like cheap, abundant energy. Like if you solve that problem, doesn't that just close the gap like very rapidly?
Yeah, but their ability to get cheap, abundant energy depends on their ability to spend on research and development and manufacturing.
No, it doesn't. Like if we have like
And to
immense
collaborate.
cheap, we'll just give them energy in the same way that we just give them money today. Like why?
Maybe not. Maybe they have to follow our rules first before we give it to them.
Look in this like
Maybe it becomes our new way of exercising control over other nations. What did we do before? We went into nations and accumulated their natural resources, put them into debt, and then told them what to do.
But
and
we
took
have
over their
we have a
economies.
globalized
What will the
supply
world look like in the
chain
future
where
when we
most
begin
of
to do
the
that?
chips are not even manufactured in the U.S. anyway.
Doesn't matter.
We're just gonna build superconductor manufacturing facilities in the U.S. and hoard all the tech.
No, they're not probably going to be all built in the U.S. Certain countries will be better at manufacturing them than others. Depends. Back to Eric's model. Look at the supply chain. Where do the raw materials come from? Great. Let's understand that first. Is there going to be a material that is rare, earth, at all? And will there be a high demand for it with a low supply? Well, we have to figure that out too. Will we be able to create a superconductor with different types of materials and not just this unique set that we found out? Like all of these are important factors. Then the ability to manufacture it, which certain countries are an advantage for and others are behind. If you're telling me that Uganda is going to be just as well off as the United States
or
then you're full of
Taiwan.
shit. Like there's no way.
No chance.
Like, there's no chance. Like the countries
I'm not saying they're
that
just
make
going to
headway
be as well
first,
off. I'm just going to say that their gap is going to close relative to us. Like, are we
Which
not
gap?
going to sell
the gap of what?
the gap between like their poverty rate versus our baseline? It's going to continue to close as it has since like the dawn of capitalism.
No, I think eventually. But I think this is where UBI comes into place. I think this is where our ability to coordinate around all of this comes into play. Like I think that there's going to be a wider wealth gap. We're going to control nations. There's going to be like an OPEC for superconductors. And I think that OPEC of superconductors is going to try to bully around other countries, tell them what to do, and in order to get access to this energy and this technology,
but
they'll have to play by the rules.
But why does that happen? Like we're talking about something that's currently made with copper and lead.
I think
right?
you're looking at it in too much of like a utopian way.
No, I'm
That
not.
it's
like
just
one
gonna
of
be
the
this like abundant thing that everybody
Like, has the
gets.
wealth gap even
But what is
narrowed today? Like, just based on current tech, like, do you think Uganda has closed the wealth gap relative
Uganda is
to the Western world? I don't think so.
What? Of course they have. What are you talking about? Like
I
the
don't think so.
capitalism has brought like billions of people out of poverty in the last 100 years.
Like the Congo is thriving. Like, no.
These are not debatable facts. Like you can go look at any objective measure of poverty throughout the world over the last century. It's like it's not even close. Like capitalism has lifted quite literally billions of people out of poverty. You may be correct in that some elements of, I don't know if it's capitalism or the way we do money here in the U.S. has created a wealth gap within our borders, right? But like at the bottom end of the spectrum, right?
Well,
like
it's
the people at the bottom are being raised up very, very
I think there
rapidly.
are two different arguments. One is the widening of the wealth gap, and you're arguing that the bottom raises. Like they're two different arguments. The bottom can raise, and the wealth gap can widen, and those two things can
Good
exist.
distinction. Important distinction.
Yeah. I mean, we're conflating too many things here, though. Like the
Only because you're wrong.
Well, you raised the point.
I'm not wrong. You
let's
guys
get
are
into
literally
the-
arguing about like facts that have happened over the last century, like that they're like you can just look up and are not matters of opinion. So I'm not.
So
I'm
the
not
wealth
wrong
gap
on
has
this.
narrowed.
No
in
one
your
is
opinion.
disagreeing with you
The
on
wealth
this
gap,
one
yes,
point
the
you're
wealth gap
fixated
on a global level
You're
has narrowed
fixated
greatly,
on-
and
you're
that's
fixated
some
on
people.
capitalism raising people out of poverty. Great, sure, got it. You
Yes.
get that point. But like, let's go into the deeper thing here. It's like, how does it relate to superconductors? How does it relate to our future? I think that's going to cause more conflict. I think this doesn't come without cost. That is my point.
I just like so disagree with this because a lot of the
everything has always come with a cost.
No, things
And
have come with it. Look, like a lot of the root of violence and everything it is around like scarcity, right? So we've fought around oil because there's like a fixed amount of oil. We've talked about maybe having conflict over like manufacturing like batteries and stuff because they rely on rare earth minerals. There's a finite amount of them.
To
If
get
we
to the
can
point of full
manufacture
abundance
something,
takes time.
if we can manufacture something that it comes from lead and copper, that is very different from like manufacturing something that relies on like large amounts of like say like lithium.
So
Like,
when
they're
we
not
only
the
have
same.
so much of it, and it's a finite source for a while until it is so abundant that we don't care anymore, and we go, "You want some? You want some? Sure, I'll give you some."
We have
It takes
tons of lead and
time
copper.
to get to the point.
We have
No,
tons of lead and copper.
We have tons of the raw material.
Yes.
We don't have tons of iPhones that last 10 days and that don't lose any battery life over 10 years. We don't have that
Right,
yet.
because
We don't
your
have a
iPhone
Tesla
your
yet.
iPhone requires a lot of lithium.
We don't have GPUs yet that are, 10 times of the computing power that they are today. Once we have all those things at scale, then sure, I can believe in a world where there's abundance, and yeah, sure, Jimmy can have some and Sally can have some over in, Sweden and China. It's like no big deal. But that takes time. And in that time that it takes, there is a war that will occur. There's conflict that will occur, and there are alliances that will occur.
Why is there going to be a conflict over lead?
Because everyone will want to get this technology.
But we
as quickly
have
as possible.
plenty of these raw materials. Like you're
No,
not going to have
but
the conflict if there's
you're
not
It's
a
the conflict
scarcity
over
of the
lead,
raw
it's the
material.
conflict over our ability to manufacture the
Yes.
things that result
The
in
bottleneck.
the goodness that you want better energy grids, you want better all the things that
Right,
we
but
want.
what
It
is the
takes time.
bottleneck in manufacturing, and why will there be a bottleneck? Like, what is going to be the bottleneck in manufacturing?
Because not
these
every
things?
country can manufacture.
So, but like
That's-
we
yeah.
have but like that's the whole point of like globalism. Like not every country is equally good at like getting fish. Not every country is equally good at like growing wheat.
But
Not every
according to
country
you
is
and
equally
according to
good
Peter
at.
Zeihan, we're not in that world anymore as well. So which one is it going to be? Is it going to be an isolated world that's not so globalist and our oceans are not going to be patrolled for us anymore and we're not going to have open free trade? Or is it going to be the one where there is? And I think that if we're moving toward a world where borders are closing, we're getting more secure about bringing manufacturing back home, what you have back home becomes critically more important. Your ability to manufacture these things at home without reliance on other countries becomes more important.
That point is like irrespective of like superconductor. They're just like another thing that is manufactured though. Like you're
all right.
Like you want to.
We can disagree.
I don't know.
We can disagree.
I think that
the wealth gap widens.
Is going to
Like the idea that like I just don't
cost.
get the idea that like because we have superconductors the wealth gap widens. I'm
You're
just not
fixated
following
on that, but my deeper point is that I do believe this makes the world better,
Yes.
but it will not come overnight, and it will not come without cost to some countries.
Agreed.
And it will hurt a lot of people in the world until that end product becomes so abundant that it no longer has value.
I just don't understand
and
who
it
is getting
becomes-
hurt and why.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. We're talking about shit that doesn't exist. It's in the future.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm trying to parse it out. I'm like, I just want to like, yeah, how does that happen?
What do we got in the chat?
What's chat
The
saying?
all the chat can talk about is why you left the thing of tobacco chew on Nick's chair.
Well,
did?
it's,
It's the whole chat right now.
it's an accurate representation of Nick.
You're talking about like
I
a
didn't see that.
post-scarcity universe,
Is
and
that Nick?
Yeah.
Zin Nick?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
there's literally a comment about cocaine and hookers in the chat.
Oh boy. We don't do any of that. Oh man. Yeah. So I mean, maybe to kind of like begin to bring it home and round it out. I don't know your guys' thoughts on this. This is a big topic. It's been really interesting, but I do think, to my question, that this is assuming this is it, and assuming if it's not it, we're there soon in the next couple of years. This is like the defining catalyst for the singularity. Like this makes all the things that the singularity requires, which is mainly AI and supercomputing.
Wait, is it, yeah, okay.
Possible.
Okay, that's what
Like
I was asking.
this is the upgrade that was necessary to bring us super intelligence ultimately, right?
This gives us supercomputing,
Everything.
and then the supercomputing with the AI gives us everything we ever want. Yeah.
Everything. To the point where, depending on who you ask, what is your definition of the singularity? You know, one philosopher's blanking on his name right now is like where we don't become recognizable anymore. Like we will be so beyond anything. It'll be like more different than us and Neanderthals. Like that is the level of upgrade we're talking about here. That's going to be fucking shocking, and that's in our lifetimes. So, yeah, this is a huge thing. Huge thing.
Yeah, things are moving fast now. And I think it's going to be weird to readjust to because I think we went through a period where things actually stopped moving fast
Right.
and we stopped doing a lot.
Oh, was that your take on the last episode?
Oh, we're done with that phase? Is that phase over?
Wait, can we just mention how I was like a bottom signal in physics last
That was
week?
great. That was great. For those that don't know, can you share what happened?
Oh, I was ranting about how physics hasn't done anything like meaningful that's like impacted our lives, like on the level of, you know, Einstein or
episode.
Oppenheimer or Heisenberg
which
in
I
the last like
thoroughly-
30 or 40 years.
I thoroughly disagree.
Which, by the way, a couple of people on Twitter got very upset with me over, and I maintain that they're wrong.
including myself.
But like right in the middle of the rant, actually, like Cameron in the chat was like, "I think we just made a superconductor," and I remember reading it like, "What?" And then I went home after the episode and looked at it, and I was like, "Oh shit!"
Oh, it happened during our episode?
Yeah, he said
Oh
it in
my
the
God.
chat.
I don't know. I do want to wrap soon, but like, can I ask you this though? Like, as it pertains to crypto, does quantum computing disrupt like the SHA-256 encryption model? Like, are we at risk of like anything that's sort of encryption based on like pre-quantum tech? Is that all fucked, or is
I mean, Shaw's fucked as far as I understand it. Like, you could just brute force.
you can
with
brute
like
force it? They have this like difficulty mechanism that changes every 2 weeks, but you could just like fucking take it over.
The difficulty thing, I don't think has anything to do with like how difficult it is to crack it. That's just like a mining thing.
Yeah, but like in 2 weeks.
I mean, this is beyond like Bitcoin, right? This is like all of your passwords and all encrypted data on the internet.
Yeah,
kind of wild, actually.
So, as we talk about the risks here, like we briefly glossed over them, I think that could be a massive risk.
It's kind of like I feel like people in crypto are kind of like whistling past the graveyard in it a little bit. I'm sure some gigabrain out there has already thought up a solution and how we fork and fix it that I'm not aware of, but I don't know, like there's been a lot of technologies throughout time that think they're cool, and then something comes up and it just wipes them out and they don't notice it because they think they're sort of entrenched and everything's fine. I'm not saying that will happen, but it has happened. And if this stuff moves very quickly, it's something I'd be concerned about. But I also don't think it's going to move that quickly. So.
I don't know about that, but isn't it huge for cryptography as a whole? Quantum cryptography?
I mean, we'd have to create new kinds of cryptography.
Yeah, like
right?
new protection mechanisms, because what we currently use probably gets broken by quantum computing.
Right. So it's like great and terrible for
Yeah,
security.
yeah.
Yeah, at the same time. Just like every technology.
But like with ETH, the mechanism is based on staked ETH, so it's not based on brute force hash power. So is that safer than Bitcoin?
Someone in the chat is saying that Ethereum uses KeyCack 256. I don't know if that's a real thing, but said it's more secure.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes it quantum
My
proof,
bags
but
safe.
yeah, yeah. I wish I could tell you that I was very familiar with the cryptography, but I mostly draw lines. I have a rudimentary knowledge of cryptography. Anyway, do you guys have any parting thoughts today?
No, but I think that we're living in an absolutely wild time, and I think it's real.
We are in a wild time, and it's crazy how sometimes you don't realize it's a wild time when you're in it.
On
like
the
you're
roller
just kind
coaster.
of, but you look back
no way
and you
to
go,
tell.
"Holy crap, that was wild."
Yeah, I guess my question for you guys is: do you guys think this is? I mean, we don't fucking know, but like, is this it or not? Is this the defining moment or blooper? And we'll be back in like 2 years.
I think the prediction markets have it at like 30% right now, which is a pretty high percentage for something that would change the nature of humanity.
Yeah.
I've seen top scientists on Twitter, however you want to define that. I've seen numbers from like 2 to like 10%. But I feel like even 2% with this is like a crazy high. It's a massive expected value because the value, even with a tiny probability, is so high. And then we also have to consider the fact that even if this isn't it, like what's happened with it, it's sort of like put a crack in the door, and like somebody else is going to be able to just come in and kick it down a lot more easily now. Like it'll lead to something
exactly,
which will like
That's why
I feel
view
like
it as an inevitability.
Yeah, I feel like it is for sure an inevitability, but like it's kind of a question of like next year or next
moment
decade.
Either way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, just happy to be here, watching it all unfold.
Well, I'll be ready
with you guys.
to jump on those trades at the moment that you signal yes, sir. And I want to hear more about some of those companies that might expose themselves in the supply chain that are bullish for this. I think that's where the alfalfa is for sure. That, and it'll be very interesting to think about all the industries that we need to get involved in to some degree.
It's gonna change our whole view of the world potentially, where we're like technologies that didn't exist, like industries that didn't exist, where it's like, oh wow,
100%. All right, amazing. Thank you to the Alfalfa community, the chat, for being here today. The chat going off, having their own just whole amazing conversation.
I love the chat. We have
I've been trying to
we have
multitask.
Kate in the chat giving us actual cryptography alpha, and then Edmund is just trolling, and
Well, Edmund's a goat.
he's talking about expelling protein or something. I don't know what he's doing in there. But
Yeah, if you haven't already and you're in the chat, please like the video. If you're watching on YouTube, please like the video. Send the signal to everybody that this was a good video. And like I said in the beginning, a small thing you can do to help the podcast is share a recent episode with a friend and spread the word. Talk to you guys next week. See you soon.
Until next time, gentlemen.
thank you,
Peace.
everybody.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.